Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into a topic that I think we all know is pretty common, but whoa, super complex. We're talking infidelity today.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think almost everyone has some kind of experience with,
Yeah,
either directly or, someone close to them.
right. A friend, family.
Right.
It's kind of everywhere. And to really get into it, we're going to this book by Esther Perel. It's called The State of Affairs, and I gotta say, chapter 8. Oh man, it's juicy. Rethinking Infidelity. That's what she calls it. Secrets, lies, the whole nine yards.
You know what I like about Perel is she's not just pointing fingers. She's a therapist,
Yeah.
right? So she's been in the room with actual couples going through this. It's not just some theory in a book.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting to me. She's really getting at the nitty-gritty of how these secrets play out, and it's not always the big dramatic stuff you see in
Oh,
movies.
for sure. She talks about, remember Megan? She felt more dishonest after she ended her affair. It's like living a double life in a weird way felt more real to her.
Whoa. That's messed up, right? And then there's this whole other layer where even therapists get caught in the web.
Yeah.
What happens when they know about the infidelity, but the betrayed partner doesn't? Confidentiality.
It was such an ethical dilemma. Traditionally, it's like couples therapy can't work unless everything is out in the open. But Perel, she's like, hold on a minute. She has this thing called an open secrets policy.
I gotta hear more about this.
So basically what's said in individual therapy, it stays there, even if it means the therapist knows about the affair and the other partner is in the dark.
Wow, isn't that deceiving the betrayed partner? I mean, don't they have a right to know?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But Perel argues that sometimes forcing that disclosure, it's like it just blows everything up. It can shut down communication. The unfaithful partner feels attacked, and it can actually prevent them from really dealing with the reasons they cheated in the first place.
So it's more about letting them figure things out on their own, even if it means keeping a secret from their partner.
Yeah, and Perel's point is that sometimes allowing that individual processing, even with secrets, can be more helpful in the long run.
I mean, I get it, but it still feels kind of shady. The therapist is almost like a priest taking confession.
In a way, yeah. And she uses this really striking example to drive it home. This woman who'd been faking orgasms for 20 years. Her point being that infidelity secrets, while obviously painful, aren't necessarily more significant than other kinds of secrets in a relationship.
So, it makes you think, should therapists even be treating infidelity secrets differently from any other kind of secret?
Huge question. Right. And then there's that big question. Is it ever okay to keep a secret, even when you're supposed to be totally honest with your partner, especially in a committed relationship?
Right, because isn't honesty the foundation?
Supposedly. But Perel actually lays out this framework for deciding when to tell the truth. It has to be honest, yes, but also helpful and kind.
Ooh, I like that. Kind.
Right. It's not just honesty at all cost, which is what we always hear. She actually says flat out, sometimes telling the truth can do more damage than good. She gives this example and it just breaks your heart. This guy who's terminally ill and wants to confess past affairs to his wife, he might find peace, but for her, it could completely shatter her world, especially at a time like that.
Oof. Yeah. That's rough. It makes you think about whose well-being you're really considering when you decide to spill a secret.
It's not just about getting it off your chest. It's about the impact on the other person.
And I guess that's where culture comes in too, right? What's considered acceptable or unacceptable varies so much around the world.
Oh, absolutely. Perel contrasts that American, tell-all, be totally transparent thing with cultures that prioritize family harmony and being discreet, keeping things quiet.
She has that story of Amira, right? The Pakistani-American woman who kept her dad's infidelity secret to protect the family. And then her friend, Marnie, who was American, totally exposed her mom's affair.
Yeah. Their cultures, completely shaped how they dealt with it. Amira was all about family unity, even if it meant a secret. Marnie, she's like, honesty is everything, no matter what. But then Perel brings up the impact on kids, family therapist Harriet Lerner. She talks about how damaging it can be for kids to carry the weight of a parent's secret.
So it's potential harm all over the place for the person who was cheated on, for the kids, even for the person keeping the secret. It's a mess.
It's a web, right?
It really is. And I think before we even get into how to rebuild trust, which is a whole other can of worms, we got to understand, why do people cheat in the first place?
Yeah, it can feel oh man, are we going deeper down the rabbit hole?
Yeah.
But this is where it gets really interesting, right? It's not just the actions, the secrets and lies. It's the psychology of infidelity. Why do people do it?
Yeah, because I think we tend to oversimplify it, like, oh, they must not be in love anymore, or there's no passion, or whatever.
It's easy to jump to those conclusions for sure. But Perel, she pushes back on that. She talks about rationalizations. It's like the stories we tell ourselves to make our actions okay. And getting to those, she says, that's crucial for actually rebuilding trust.
So it's not enough to just admit what you did. You also have to understand the why behind it.
Exactly. And sometimes the why is a lot harder to swallow than the what. Perel gives this example of Don, I think his name was. He had these long-term affairs, multiple. And at first his explanation was, oh, he wasn't feeling close to his wife. But as they worked together, I was like, whoa, there's a lot more going on here. A fear of getting older, needing to feel validated. Like there was this emptiness he was trying to fill outside the relationship.
Man, it's so easy to just blame everything else, right? Instead of looking inward and being honest with the stuff that's really driving us.
Total denial sometimes. It's like slapping a Band-Aid on a huge wound.
Yeah.
You might cover it up for a minute, but it's not going to heal anything. And if you want real healing, both partners need to understand what's actually going on under the surface.
Okay, so how do you get past those surface explanations? How do you get to the real deal why behind the affair?
Well, Perel talks about this shift, going from detective questions to what she calls investigative questions. It's like, think of the difference between a police procedural and, one of those intense psychological dramas.
Ooh, okay. I like that. Tell me more.
So detective questions are all about the cold, hard facts. Who was it? Where'd you meet? How many times? It's like gathering evidence, right? But those questions, they can actually keep you stuck in that cycle of pain and resentment.
Yeah, because you're just constantly reliving the betrayal. Those details, they hurt.
It's like picking at a scab, It never gets a chance to heal. But investigative questions, they're about the emotional landscape. What were you hoping would happen? What needs weren't being met in our relationship? What were you actually seeking in the affair?
Those are hard questions, man, both to ask and to answer. But I can see how they get to something much deeper. It's not just the what, it's the why.
And that's where the possibility of real healing starts. It's not about saying what happened was okay, but about truly understanding the reasons behind it, and then maybe working together to address those things.
So instead of just pointing fingers and placing blame, you're shifting to like a place of understanding and maybe even growth, both as individuals and as a couple.
Exactly. And it's not a quick fix. Perel even suggests that the unfaithful partner read a letter to the betrayed partner. And it's not just about apologizing. It's about expressing what they've learned, about why they did what they did.
It's like a confession letter, but more in depth.
Yeah. It's about owning up, showing vulnerability, and reaffirming their commitment to the relationship, to their partner. It's about being willing to do the hard work.
But then there's this whole other layer we have to talk about. Technology, social media, smartphones, all that. It makes it so much easier to cheat, but also so much easier to get caught. It's a whole new game, right?
It really is, and it's a minefield. But Perel, she addresses it head on. She's like, don't fall into the trap of demanding complete transparency, like wanting access to your partner's phone and all their social media 24/7.
Oh, but I feel like that's such a common reaction. When you've been betrayed, you want proof. You want reassurance that it's not happening again,
Oh, totally. But Perel argues that constant monitoring, it can backfire big time. It creates this atmosphere of suspicion and control. And that just erodes trust, which is the opposite of what you're trying to do. It's like saying, I don't trust you, so I have to constantly check up on you.
Yeah, you're basically setting them up to fail almost. You're reinforcing that lack of trust instead of rebuilding it.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And Perel, she reminds us, being faithful is a choice. You can't spy on someone into being faithful. You can't control someone into it. It has to come from within.
So it's more about addressing the underlying issues, the stuff that led to the affair in the first place, rebuilding that foundation of trust, rather than trying to micromanage your partner's every move.
It's exactly. It's about creating an environment where you can both feel safe and respected. But, how do you actually do that? How do you go from feeling betrayed to actually forgiving someone? From hurt to healing? That is the question, right?
Yeah.
And I think Perel would be the first to say, there's no easy answer there. Healing from this, it's a process. It's long. It's painful. There's no magic formula, no set timeline,
So it's not just like you have a few tough conversations and then, boom, everything's back to normal.
Oh, absolutely not. It's way more like tending to this deep wound. It takes so much patience, care, time, And honestly, sometimes even with all that, the relationship, it can't be saved.
Which has got to be just devastating. But for the couples who do want to stay together, who want to try to make it work, where do they even start?
Perel really stresses this idea of creating a space, like a safe space, where both people can just let it out. All the feelings, even the ugly ones, the anger, the hurt, everything. The betrayed partner needs to be able to just express all that. And the person who cheated, they have to like really own what they did, show that they get it, that they're sorry.
So it's like honesty, but also compassion. Being real about what happened and why, but also being kind to each other, understanding that everyone's hurting.
Exactly. And remember that whole thing about letting go. That's huge here.
Yeah.
The betrayed partner, they might need to let go of this need to punish, to control. And the other partner, they have to let go of getting defensive all the time. Really listen. Really try to get where the other person's coming from.
Man, it's like both people are being asked to like really step outside themselves, be vulnerable in ways they might not be used to. But after something like this, when that trust is broken, is that even possible?
That's that leap of faith Perel talks about. It's a choice. You have to decide, I'm going to believe that we can heal from this. I'm going to believe that we can rebuild.
That takes so much strength to even try.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not easy. And forgiveness. It's not like you just arrive there. It's a journey, right? There'll be good days and bad days. You'll question everything. But Perel reminds us, even after something like this, there can be growth. Sometimes couples come out of this experience with a deeper understanding, a stronger bond, you know.
So it's like it can either destroy you or it can refine you, make you stronger.
The crucible, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what about the couples who they decide to stay together, but they never really deal with what happened? Like, can you really move on without that deep dive into the why?
Good question.
Because Perel, she's pretty clear about this. She's like, don't just sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Those unresolved issues, they're going to come back to bite you in some way.
Yeah.
If you're going to stay together, you got to process it, even if it hurts. Otherwise, it's like that wound's just going to keep bleeding.
So even if it's messy, even if it's the last thing you want to do, facing the truth, that's ultimately the best way to heal.
It's not about dwelling on the past. It's about understanding it so you can actually move on, learn from it, build something better.
I love that. It seems like Perel is really offering a message of hope here. Even when things are really, really dark, infidelity doesn't have to be the end. It can be this opportunity to grow, to change.
It can be, but it takes work, a lot of work, honesty with yourself and with each other, and choosing love even when it's hard.
Yeah, choosing love. So as we wrap up this deep dive into infidelity, I think more than anything, I'm just struck by how complicated relationships are, how messy and beautiful and challenging all at the same time. But I also feel the sense of hope that even after betrayal, healing, and even forgiveness, it is possible.
And I think the biggest takeaway here, it's not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, the questions that lead to deeper understanding of ourselves and of the people we love.
It's about curiosity over judgment, compassion over blame, and at the end of the day, choosing love